Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order this July 19th meeting of the Sarasota County Coastal Advisory Committee. We have 4 of our voting members present and 2 of our ex officio members, which means we do have a quorum for business. I'm going to get started on the agenda right away. First item is approval of the minutes of our last meeting of April 18th. The Coastal Advisory Committee meets every other month, so this, in fact, is our most recent meeting. Draft minutes have been prepared and distributed for committee members to review. Do I have a motion regarding the minutes of April 18th? Mr. Anderson?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, second by Mr. Smalley. Is there any discussion of the minutes of April 18th? Seeing no discussion, in favor of adoption as drafted, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Chair votes aye. The minutes are adopted as drafted. Thank you very much, Luana. Next item on our agenda is an opportunity for public to be heard. Say, as we always do, there is a second opportunity later in the meeting. If anybody in the audience hears something as part of our discussion or business and would like to follow up at that point in time, there is a second opportunity. In this first opportunity, I do have a request to speak from Calvin LaBeouf. Mr. LaBeouf, you're welcome. Come on up to the microphone. Please introduce yourself, and you're welcome, and proceed.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Calvin LaBeouf. I got a couple of questions for Mr. Truitt before we get started, I hope. Mr. Truitt, we go back a long ways. When I first came out with this idea of the saltwater catch basin, the paper interviewed me, and then they went and interviewed you, and you had your point, and I had my point. I take it that they didn't tell you everything because it wasn't made of cement that fits a football field, as you know. But I've seen you over the years, and I've accepted that. You also give me an idea of how to use my catch basin, which is at the end of a jetty. And I think that was a very good idea, and I went forward with it. And I would like to know if you think that the saltwater catch basin is viable now, if it's good.
Well, you're irrespective of the time limits and all, you're asking me my personal opinion, which is a little bit outside of the business of the Coastal Advisory Committee. That said, members of the committee and staff are cringing now. I've never been loath to give my personal opinion, but let the record reflect that I don't represent the county or Coastal Advisory Committee. But my opinion hasn't changed at all. I think the basic idea that you're promoting, which is in essence, in some way, your way, collecting sand, transferring that collected sand through some method to either where the sand was going originally or where it's needed, I don't have any problem with that basic model. And I think, as we've discussed for years, the idea of sand transfer plants dates back to the 1930s. There are, in fact, sand transfer plants on the east coast of Florida that are operating now. You have always taken the position, and I apologize if I'm characterizing it wrong, you have always taken the position that your idea in some way, because of the uniqueness of the equipment and your input into it, is not a sand transfer system. It's, in essence, something else. And this is kind of where we always get into this gray area of semantics. I believe in collecting sand, bypassing it, backpassing it, moving to where it was going. I think there are a number of ways of doing that, and your catchment basin is certainly a potentially viable one.
Okay. Can we start the clock now?
Please.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
I believe Mr. Lear told me that the papers I left off at the commissioners, he wanted to get it verified and explain it to you, but I dropped off some papers to you. And Mr. Laird, you know, we met a couple of times at the beach renourishment
Right.
with the state.
Right, sure.
I've asked every engineer at that meeting, because I rented a stand there to speak, and I couldn't find one of them that could say it wouldn't work. That's my wife here at one of them here, and the sign's up there. There's a lot of engineers came over and saw us, and they couldn't tell me it wouldn't work. I got the Army Corps of Engineers saying it'll work. In fact, one of them suggested Big Pass and New Pass would be an ideal spot to use it. Cliff Truitt, which was no, not Cliff Truitt, I'm sorry, Jeff Littlejohn.
Right.
He wrote an article on it, and he was at the time the secretary of DEP.
DEP, right.
Deputy secretary, something like that. And they don't normally write letters to help you. And he was very impressed with what I was saying, and he thought it would work. I talked to him for over an hour and a half at that meeting, which is only supposed to have been 15 minutes. I asked him a whole lot of questions, and he asked me a whole lot of questions. And I made it pretty clear to him that it would help me if he could write a letter if he agreed with me, and he did. This is the part that you suggested at the end of a jetty.
Right.
The idea of the sand trap transfer, whatever that's what you want to call it, what it does, it works with Mother Nature. Mother Nature takes the sand off the beach, and like you said, the jetty, it goes out to the basin, and it drops into the basin. It's 100% green. It'll work. The pipe that's on the bottom of it is very unique. It creates a vacuum, a Centaury effect, and it picks up all the sand, and you pump it right back onto the beach. You can put it in a container. You can put it back where it came from. You can put it south of it, which is, if you look at Siesta Key, from Siesta Key down, all the way down to Sharkey Pier, you got no sand at all. It's all rocks, and that could be replaced. My problem is, it's not just putting the basin in. You really got to open up the passes, and I'm talking about Big Pass and New Pass. It should be dredged, and then you'll have a operation that's working. If you read a couple of the articles I left you, I wrote an article on red tide. The red tide causes red tide. The dredging causes red tide, and NOAA, which is the 2005, they wrote an article, and I got the article. It shows where red tide was really prevalent for 14 months. It was terrible for 14 months, and they were dredging for 5 beaches at that time. I knew about the beaches, but I didn't know what NOAA did. So that, to me, would help part of your problems. Red tide kills a lot of fish, millions of fish, and you have it every time they dredge, just about. It shows up. And people saying it's from some of the fertilizer coming off the land, that's not true. It comes from the Gulf. When they go out and dredge, or when you got a bad storm, you might have it, because in the Gulf on the west side, it's very shallow. It's about 50 feet deep, and it doesn't take much of a storm to stir up the bottom. But the dredging stirs it up real bad, and it gets real bad with red tide. That's one thing. Another thing is, with your passes being closed the way they are, New Pass is, they took the buoys out, Big Pass is closed. Your boats are landlocked now, the big ones down at Marina Jack. But I also wrote an article on that. If you get any kind of a storm that's bad enough that goes over the barrier islands, which that's the only place the storm's got to go, because now they can't go into the passes and relieve the pressure, because now you're going to go over the barrier islands and you can cause a lot of damage. I think it's criminal for the way they got the passes right now. I really do, because it could take some people's lives. I know it can do a lot of damage to property. And it's not only going to go over the barrier islands, it'll come right into Sarasota, because your intercoastal waterways is in real bad shape. It's full of silt. It's really pathetic. Let me show you the little video I got. I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
You enjoy being able to go to the beach? How about boating? Being out fishing, enjoying the waves, or just enjoying time with your friends and family? Sometimes we take these pastimes for granted. Ever think about what would happen if the beach eroded away? Or the boat pass is completely closed up? Of course you haven't. Who does? The governments and businesses of coastal communities, that's who. They make billions of dollars every year off tourism and recreation. Businesses gain money through products and services when you visit. The local government makes money through asset taxes and transaction taxes. Even if you don't live in a coastal community, the federal government will use part of your taxes to keep our nation's coast desirable for vacationers. To do this, they must re-nourish the beaches and keep the waterways open. When the beaches are re-nourished, or the waterways are dredged, there are several consequences. The beach turns into a construction zone. Ugly dredging ships appear in a once beautiful skyline. And marine life is endangered. Beach renourishment changes the consistency of the sand and changes the shape of the beach. The marine life is squashed under the equipment. And many of the animals who make their homes in the beach no longer have the ability to live there. Dredging has many of the same effects, but also stirs up the water, making it muddy and unlivable for the delicate ecosystem. Also, neither of these processes last very long, and so it has to be done over and over every few years, at the cost of marine life and billions of taxpayers' money. Imagine your neighbor's house gets knocked down every 5 years, and you're expected to pay the bill out of your own pocket. That's essentially what's happening to the marine life, and you're paying for it. Not only with your tax dollars, but in loss of your enjoyment of the coastline. You know the sea turtles are dying, the fishing is no longer viable, and your favorite beach getaway is a giant construction site. This all sounds grim, but it can be changed. A new invention, called the saltwater catch basin, can save the coastline. Once it's installed, it never has to be replaced. It keeps the waterways open and continuously re-nourishes the beaches without construction equipment. The marine life is free to thrive. The fishing remains plentiful. And you're not robbed of your right to enjoy the beach. Best of all, it costs billions of dollars less than the alternatives, saving taxpayers money. For more information, visit saltwatercatchbasin.com. Let your government officials know you want to change. Take a moment to email them about this revolutionary system. You can help make a difference and save the coastline.
I mentioned Jeff Littlejohn. There's a paper that he wrote, and you want a copy of it? I can turn it over to the lady over there, and she can make you a copy,
Please do,
if you want it.
please.
That's Little Pass. You got Big Pass and Little Pass here. That's really pathetic. There's both of the passes together. I mean, it's just common sense. I went down to Charlotte County and I did a presentation down there, and they were very interested in the saltwater catch basin because one of the commissioners at the time, when I came out with the idea, she said they were very interested down there that I should go see this Mrs. Duffy, I think, or what her name was, and which I did. And they let me do a presentation. And when I did the presentation, that's on a CD. When I did the presentation, two of them was for it, and they give me three things to do, which go to WCIND, go to the Army Corps of Engineers, and also go to DEP. And I did all three, and when I got back, the two that was very interested was no longer on the board. One of the commissioners, I had to go see the two new commissioners. One of the commissioners says, "You want that in? I'll be glad to put it in for you." Grease the palm. And I'm not that kind of a person. I'm sorry. He's no longer there. He got fired. Not over me, but he got fired for doing things he wasn't supposed to. And I think what they missed out on, it cost them $5 million when I first did the presentation, and I thought that's what it was going to be cost. And I had an engineer there, not an engineer, but a dredging company with me, and he explained to them that they'll dredge the pass, put the catch basin in, that was going to go in the pass. He says, and if it didn't work, we'll take it out. That was way a long time ago. It was a win-win situation because it cost less than $1 million. That's dredging the sand and putting the thing in. And if it didn't work, we take it out. So it was 100% perfect for them because they could have saved $5 million, four at least, because it only cost $1 million to do it. It cost them $7 million to do it after the presentation. So your cost of things going up keeps on going up. Nothing that has been done works at all. Nothing. I don't care what it is. Groins don't work. I can show you groins that's underwater, that's at a couple places. The dredging don't work because you got to do it all over again. This saltwater catch basin, when it goes in, it's got a camera in there that lets the pump know when to come on, when to go off. It keeps the pump pumping when it's full. It goes off when it's empty, so it's not running constantly. And like I said, you can pump it on the sand, you can pump it on the beach, or you can pump it anywhere as you want. It's an ideal thing. And you know, even with this silt in the harbors, that can all be put in. The video showed 3 basins together. That's where you go across a river or something. I'm talking one single basin at the end of a jetty, not a lot. It's well worth to even try it, because Big Pass is costing $22 to $28 million. They're going to dredge it, not even dredge the pass, they're just going to take a clump of sand out of it and putting 3 groins in. There goes your sand. Your groins don't last. New pass was just dredged last year. Already, they took the buoys out. It used to be a federal inlet, and it was so bad, the federal government didn't want to do it no more because it kept on going up and up and up. That's where we stand. But I'd like to do a presentation to the county commissioners where a lot of people can be there and they can see it. I did a presentation for Charlotte County, which was pretty good. I also went over to Kiwanis Club over in Longboat Key. I did a presentation for them. There was 30 people there, and they came up and congratulated me that my presentation was very unique and it was good. So I'm not ashamed of doing a presentation. I'll be glad to do a presentation. And I'd really like to do one with the county commissioners, because when you do a presentation, you got it on CD, and that tells you where, you know, I can turn it over to the press or whatever. If they don't want to do it because they're making money, they got their hands tied if it goes public. But anyways, that's my opinion.
Right.
I just
Indeed.
want you to know that.
Okay.
So anyways, that's it.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Before you leave, any committee members have questions? Anybody have any comments? Questions? Okay. All right.
Okay?
Thank you. We're going to ask
one.
Mr. Reeford to guide us eventually here on if this is a board direction, are we making a recommendation to the board, or how we'll proceed from here. But Mr. LaBeouf, we'll figure out the process and do what we can. So thank you very much.
Jeff Littlejohn also said there's money for this experimental project.
Right. Every
And,
year, the state appropriates money in the
Yeah, okay.
Beach Management Fund for innovative technologies. There's some competition for that, I might point out,
That's
but
fine.
indeed, there is money.
Well, he said I'd only have to wait maybe 2, 3, 4 months at the most for
Okay.
a permit,
Great.
which is good, instead of a whole year.
Thank you, sir. Any other public to be heard?
By the way, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate it.
Certainly. No other public to be heard? Mr. Reeford, do you have thoughts on how we got to this point, or would you like to defer your suggestions, or?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Laird Reeford, your staff liaison. This is part of currently the mechanism that would be involved. Mr. LaBeouf has indicated an interest in being able to schedule an agenda item with the county commission to provide a full presentation of the information about his technology and proposed project. The mechanism works basically to first come to this committee open to the public, as Mr. LaBeouf just did with great excellence, and explaining the first portion of the concept that he has. The next step would be, in the event that this committee saw reason and/or desire to receive a full-blown presentation,
Okay.
a scheduled agenda item for discussion before this committee, then that would be communicated to me as staff liaison to schedule that presentation at a time that would be convenient for Mr. LaBeouf to reappear before the CAC. At that point, in the event that occurred, following that presentation, then this committee would be then able to either provide a recommendation or simply take the information under advisement. There'd be a number of options at that point. But that would be the means by which Mr. LaBeouf would have the ability to go, other than, of course, open to the public before the county commission.
Right.
But that is not a scheduled agenda item, and that is a 3-minute time limit. So that, Mr. LaBeouf has every right at any commission meeting to appear before the board and open to the public.
Okay, thank you. Having heard that, committee members, do we have a suggestion, comments on what we would like to do as a committee?
I'll say something.
Mr. Smalley?
I'm pretty familiar with these coastal processes, and I saw the catch basin. I see it as another form of sand bypassing, that there's 100 other ones out there. I don't know that what a full-blown presentation could, I don't know that a full-blown presentation can enlighten me anymore. So I don't know that it wouldn't set a precedent for everybody who had any kind of new technology to come before us and make a presentation and want to get on the county commission agenda. So I would say I've seen enough. I know what I know what it is, and I know what it does.
Dr. Leveroni?
Following that line of argument, I do agree, and this is the first I've seen of this technology. Whether it works or not, I wouldn't know. I haven't seen any information regarding it, but having the experience that the two of you gentlemen have as members of this committee, if this was something that we were interested in pursuing with respect to beach and sand management issues, then I would suggest that we review the entirety of the science behind these types of innovations, processes, whatever, and review it in an objective light, and not just pick one or two that come before the board interested in pursuing their particular technique, but for us to review it as a body, as an advisory body, and based on that, decide how we want to proceed with this and all other options, if this is in fact something we want to consider under our purview.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand. Mr. Anderson?
Just
No
one
comments?
more.
Mr. Smalley?
I just want to clear one thing. I do think it does work, but then there's 50 or 60 other sand bypassing techniques that also work, and it doesn't look like there's anything revolutionary in collecting sand and sending it to one way or the other. So I do think it does work, but there are ample opportunities to go into trade shows and other things and get people interested in all types of new technology.
Right, and just to comment on that, Mr. LaBeouf, as he pointed out, has done that. He's been to FSBPA, had the booth there, so. Ms. Albert, our representative today from the city of Sarasota, and I apologize for not introducing you. That's my fault. Welcome to the fray, and happy to have your comments, please.
And no problem, and certainly, thank you. Certainly being new to the committee, you know,